Welcome to the InnovateCT Podcast. So welcome everyone, Nick Wagner Sr., founder of Innovate Connecticut, and this is another episode of the InnovateCT Podcast, and I'm super excited to have a guest that I've wanted to have on for quite some time, David Noble. So David, you are the director of the Werth Institute at UConn, University of Connecticut, so thank you for joining the podcast.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here.
And why don't we have you introduce yourself first, David? So a little bit about who you are. You're a professor. You're an entrepreneur. You're an attorney. You're a lot of things. So who is David Noble? And then maybe the follow up to that is, what is the Werth Institute that you are responsible for leading?
So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great a great question. Who is David Noble? I'm an educator first and foremost. That's what I do. I spent like 30 years in school, so I feel like I'm pretty good at it now. And I really have done a lot of things and seen a lot of things for my age, I guess is the way I hear it. Like, you can't actually be that young and have done it. I started my career as an attorney. I quickly decided this wasn't as much fun, and off I went to Alabama to do my PhD. And then I slowly found my way to a teaching position at UConn, and now have moved into an administrative position, while also being the spirit and backbone of a startup. So, I like to do different things, but there's never been a point where I've spent 8 years with the same people before this, and I think it's because I found my home. So I'm at UConn. We went out 3-4 years ago and decided that we could be outstanding at entrepreneurship education. And once we decided that, we started looking for donors and found a very generous donor in Peter J. Werth, who created the Werth Institute. The core fundamental is bringing opportunities for education, for experiential learning, really pushing students to expand their entrepreneurial mindset and toolkits.
Yeah, and you mentioned quite a few things in that introduction, and I want to make sure I highlight one thing, that you are an administrator because you are the director of the Werth Institute, but you also, I believe, still teach as well, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, I try to stay as much in the classroom as you can, right? Your teaching load comes down quite a bit, but teaching is actually hard as an administrator. And so, there's a rigidity to the time frame of when you teach and whom you teach and where you have to be. And oftentimes, the director of the Werth Institute, that's a difficult piece. Like, if I need to be in San Francisco talking to alumni about what we're doing in Connecticut, it's hard to be in Connecticut teaching a class. So, but I've been ecstatic to be able to teach, and now I use a lot more co-teachers, hire in subject matter experts, and deliver education in a different way than I did 4 or 5 years ago, of course.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure I highlighted that, because I think when we've talked in your past, you're passionate about teaching, and I think you still being in the classroom, even as the director of the Werth Institute, helps you connect everything, right? Connect the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem back to the students in a way that you probably can if you weren't in the classroom. So I like that a lot.
I agree with you. I mean, you just how do you lead something when you're not interacting with those people you lead every single day? It's a pretty simple leadership principle. The Werth Institute is for students. It's not for research. It's not for startups even. It's for students. That's what we're about. And so I strongly, actually, I have 4 people, I think, in my Werth Institute that actually teach a class, right? And I think that's awesome. A big deal, and we encourage it.
So let's talk about what is an institute, because you're not a school within the University of Connecticut. You're not like the School of Business or the School of Engineering. You're an institute, which is, it's different from a school. So can you explain that to my listeners? What does that mean? Like, how is that different?
So if I ever do this correctly, I'm gonna, there's like a prize and like stuff falls down around you. The institute, so you have institutes and centers at universities. A center is within a particular school, and an institute exists at a macro level. We think of ourselves in terms of entrepreneurship for UConn, right? Not for School of Business, not for engineering, not for School of Fine Arts or education, for UConn broadly. And that leads us to a number of places that we couldn't go as a school entity. And that's why, that's why we're there. Part of Peter Werth was and what he was thinking about when he gave that gift is, I was a chemistry student. I wasn't a business student, right? I was a chemist. I ended up owning a business. And how do we help prepare a student, no matter what they're studying, to be ready to take on the world?
It's an interesting way to think about entrepreneurship and innovation, because essentially what you're doing is, if you have these verticals that are schools, your institute cuts across, and almost the way you're kind of highlighting it is that innovation and entrepreneurship can really apply to anything that you do at UConn and any major you're a part of in any school that you're in, is really what you're saying, it sounds like.
And any job that you get afterward, and anywhere you go thereafter, right? And so that's exactly it. I think we function as connective tissue across some of those vertical units. And you'll hear a lot about people discussing silos and universities, and they don't talk to each other. And it's always like, well, do you know so and so at the university? It's like, well, we have 3,000 employees, so I haven't quite made it to that one yet. But reality is, silos are necessary for deep knowledge creation and discovery. Like, you got to dive deep into what you're studying to make a breakthrough in microbiology. Where entrepreneurship comes in is it's able to connect that element to business, to art, to engineering, and end up with a product. And that's what we think of ourselves as connective tissue.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think the fact that you collaborate across all the schools and all the entities at the University of Connecticut is something that, when I went to UConn, this didn't exist. And I think it's fantastic, because I think, to your point, you're helping the students and you're really enabling and empowering the students, which I love.
So we actually, it's not just the schools too. Think about the honors program, right? Like, we'd love to see an honors college, and I'd love to raise 20 million, 25 million to do that. Think of learning communities. Think of, excellence in teaching, and, it just goes on and on and on. The university is such a big place, and that's our core function. How do you navigate this if you're a student sitting in front of me and you want to do something exciting? Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. So and we'll link to your LinkedIn profile so people can get in touch with you. We'll also link to the Peter J. Werth Institute and Entrepreneurship for Innovation website on UConn site so people can learn more. But what are some of the exciting things that the Institute and you leading it are currently doing that you're looking forward to for this upcoming school year?
So, I generally break down most of our activity right now into three categories. One, supporting all of our members that are running programs. The CCI and Jen Murphy in Hartford, they need help. They need assistance. Where can we jump in? Where can we collaborate? And we haven't, because now it's virtual. So, can we bring a repeated piece of excellence? We are currently building what I think is going to be the top mentorship program in the country. And we're engaging alumni regularly to have one-on-one engagements with students to discuss, their development, the introspection, what their careers are like, right? Trying to be intentional in those matches.
Yeah.
We're bringing in, regular guest speakers for really small sessions, not within a class, just come in, talk about private capital, come in and talk about technology, come in and talk about your entrepreneurial journey. And then finally, we're really excited about our leadership development program and some of the ways that is going, especially around diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned some of the other programs that you work with across UConn. What is your role as that, again, that connective tissue to have TIP in Farmington work with CCEI in Hartford, and et cetera? Like, how do you bring all those groups together?
So there is a certain amount of convening power, but in reality, oftentimes we're the good faith player that isn't going to steal your lunch, right? And we sort of make it okay to collaborate with someone that maybe you haven't before. You don't know them as well as we do. I think knowing the different partners, knowing the collaboration points, we're currently building collaborations across many different innovative spaces on our campuses to be able to create what we're calling SkillWorks, right? So you'll see a theme there: networks, SkillWorks. How do we deliver educational opportunities specifically around software, oftentimes in different fields, design software, CRM? How do we educate our students to be proficient at inbound marketing? If we can build up those skills, we're going to have better startups that get to CCEI. So CCEI is doing a lot of the execution of venture building on the earliest stage. Well, they're better at their job if the people show up with skills and knowledge already. And so
Absolutely.
We bring them into that conversation and say, where are we lacking? Where are our students lacking? How can we make sure we can address this? If we can build the skills for students before they go to CCI, then they're in a better place for when they get there. So understanding what's missing already and trying to help develop that, and it actually starts to connect those spaces, and they start to see value in that relationship. And then we can start talking about, hey, let's build a prototype center, right? Let's take this, let's take that, let's take this. We can box that up and say, hey, when you're a student, here's where you go to build a digital product. Here's where you go to prototype something like a blanket, or a 3D printing or VR or that sort of stuff. And that's when when you have students that have skills and you have programs that help them, it gets exciting.
So why? And I want to. I think you gave some great examples of how you're connecting everyone and some of the things you're doing. Why entrepreneurship and innovation as this institute, and why was that what was decided on by Peter J. Werth as well as UConn together, right? I mean, you mentioned he was a chemist and ended up being having his own business, very successful business, but often I think you hear entrepreneurship and innovation, even maybe sometimes overused in the education space, right? Like, are we really being entrepreneurial? Are we really being innovative? Why do you think this is so important to UConn? And not just UConn, but the entire ecosystem of Connecticut?
So UConn's the flagship university in Connecticut, and it's one of the last great public schools. The Michigans, Virginia, they're running a much more private school operation, right? And so one, you have this function of entrepreneurship is a way for people to pull themselves up. It's an entirely different, game-changing, wealth-creating, not just income-based living. It's also an alternative career for those that are not looking for that same experience, right? And so it's absolutely critical, in my opinion. Now, when we think about life transformative education, and this is something President Katsileas talks about, I think of entrepreneurship as the way to achieve that, regardless of whether you want to start a company. Working on a startup, you learn more about business than you can work in one function or another, right? And so, because you're doing so much more.
Yeah.
And it's just that early stage, everything matters. You don't know where you're going, the ambiguity of it. It's exciting. But yeah, to connect back to your point about Peter Werth, um, he was, when you ask him who he is, he's a poor farm boy from Kansas, and it's like, yeah, and you've committed $22.5 million, which will probably end up looking more like 25, around creating this thing. So you're not really a poor farm boy if you can do a $25 million check, right? And that's exactly the idea. He believes in public education. Fort Hays State out in Kansas, major supporter of their entrepreneurship program. Southern Connecticut down in New Haven, major proponent of their oceanographic pursuits there, and UConn. And so, it's just, this is the thing that we can be great at. Also, when Peter looked at what we had, and he said, you just need something to pull this together, and you're going to find yourself ranked. And I remember thinking, like, who, like, are you kidding me? And then when we got sort of the email that says, hey, you got to keep this quiet, but you're ranked, it was like, all right. And he said to me, well, now you got to get to the top 5. And
so David, for those listening, what is the importance of being ranked as a school? What does that mean?
At the end of the day, it's legitimizing and it's marketing. I mean, those are the two big pieces, right? Like we were able to change the narrative within 2 years about where UConn stands entrepreneurially. In Connecticut, you're always in the shadow of Yale, and we're not going to be Yale. And I don't care what Yale's doing. Yale's not ranked, I mean, as an undergraduate program in entrepreneurship. And, I don't, that they do what's relevant for them and their students, and that's their job. What's relevant for my students at a public university with 25,000 undergrads is totally different. Absolutely. And our students are different than theirs, and our alumni are different. It's not better or worse.
Well, I think you hit a couple really, I think, extremely important points. The idea of that entrepreneurship can literally change the life of anyone, right? Whether you've had a background coming up where you've had no money, or you've had some money, or you had a lot of money, entrepreneurship can still change your life in a very substantial way. So I love that about it, because I think, to your point, it gives opportunity. And I think if you look at the idea of entrepreneurship and innovation tied back to the state of Connecticut, and I've often talked about this throughout my journey of starting Innovate Connecticut. We have a very innovative past. I mean, name the founder of the company that was created in Connecticut, whether it was Igor Skorsky with the helicopter, or it was Samuel Colt, all the way back with, way back with manufacturing and the whole idea of, the assembly line. We have had a very innovative past, and I think to continue to build off of that as this true state of innovation, I think is fantastic.
It's critical to and I think from an educational perspective, we have to reinvent what we're doing and how we're doing it. The general education system was built for the 1950s and constructed that way, and entrepreneurship can be a change agent, not just in business, but in academia, in government structures, in almost anything you attack with this toolkit of skills. And so, we think higher ed matters. We think going to college matters. We think it's the best way to improve all of the financial and personal outcomes in your life. And we have to justify that today. And we didn't have to 30 years ago, right? And so this is a good way to do it.
So if people want to get involved, right? So if we have either alumni of UConn listening, or other people, other residents of Connecticut, they're like, hey, how can I help David and the students at UConn and the Peter J. Werth Institute? What can people do to help? How can they get involved?
So we have an essential idea around generosity, right? That's how we were created. You can basically give three things here. We accept money because we need money to run our programs and function. We're born out of philanthropy, and we exist out of philanthropy. You can give time. Our mentorship programs, one-on-one with students, really sit down. Everybody can teach a student something. They're so scared. They're looking at the world. You don't have to come into it with this great thing. Like, come talk to a student. If you've achieved something in life, share with them. Share your time.
I want to pause you right there real quick, because I think a lot of times people are really intimidated. They might not even consider themselves truly successful, right, with their careers. But I think your point is, you don't have to have started a multi-million-dollar business to come talk to students. There's a lot of other ways to be successful other than just owning your own business, right? And just sharing your life experiences are going to help them.
Absolutely. Like, think back to when you were 18 years old. You didn't know anything, right?
Yeah.
And you sit down with a kid, and I take graduates 1 or 2 years out even, and they sit there and they say, well, what do I do? Like, how do I get an internship? Well, have you emailed anyone? Go ahead, pick 5 people at companies you want to and just cold email them, tell them you're a student, right? Like, we see that kind of homework, that sort of concern, and it's like, it's easier than you think. The key to that is consistency, right? Like, the student drives on consistency, and we look at like goals, and then you look at support. It's something we call tier 3 in the office, and that's when we find, and this requires conversations with us over time, is we find that company that you can really help. They're in your industry, they're looking at your industry. There was one with insurance, right? And the kid did not know he was starting an insurance company, but he had an insurance product, right? And it was like, everybody with any experience beyond sort of the first 8 years could say that's an insurance company, and you need to talk to someone in the insurance industry, because all you're doing is taking risk, figuring out some sort of actuarial way, and then allowing people to spread out that risk over time. And so it's just, we see that all the time, and one conversation turns into 2 in those spaces, and then sometimes you never know. If you look at lactation innovation with Brittany and Jamie, Brittany was a student in nursing. Jamie's a healthcare biotech executive that's working on the company now, right, and building it. We've got other examples of that, and one that I'm very excited about coming up, and I hope we're talking about it right here pretty soon.
Oh, that's awesome. So I wanted to make sure we highlighted that, because I think there's a lot of people that want to know how can they get involved, and how can they help. And I think you gave some three I think very distinct ways that people can help out you and the students. Even if they can't write a check, it's okay. They can help in other ways. So I just want to say thank you. I can't stress even pre-COVID, right? I mean, to your point earlier, what students are expecting out of their college experience now, to your point, is we have to justify it, right? I mean, if you're going to go to school and spend a good amount of money, what are you going to get? What's your ROI on going to school, right? And I think the Peter J. Werth Institute is helping take what I think was already a positive ROI for UConn students and making it even better. I think that's the way I look at it. So
we want to be a multiplier, but we also want to teach our students what that return is, right? And and we always think about giving back. That's one of the things we talk to our students about. Like, you're not here if not for someone else. This opportunity was created by other people. UConn is not the school it was today if Nick wasn't here years ago, right? And like this piece, and you owe that to those future generations. I think it's an Ivy League idea. It started a long time ago, that comes very fundamentally, just like upon entrance to some of these elite private schools and prep schools, and we want to be able to instill that in our students, that they belong to something when you become a student at UConn, and when you come to us, you belong to us. So you're always with us, no matter what happens, and that's already been tested. It's fun.
Well, I just want to say thank you for making time. I think, again, great work, what you're doing. I appreciate everything you're doing for the students in the state of Connecticut, at UConn. And again, we'll make sure to link to David, your LinkedIn, so people get in touch with you, as well as the Peter J. Werth Institute website on the University of Connecticut site, so people can get all the information there, and again, contact you if they want to help volunteer. So I appreciate you taking time.
Thank you, buddy. Anytime.
Thank you, sir. If you would like to get involved with InnovateCT, please visit our website at www.innovatect.org. There, you can find links to our social media. We currently are active on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.